What would you do with a 30-hour layover in Sydney, Australia?
I made it, y'all.
That's Rory. He's on the bed. He's gonna glare at us the whole time we're recording. Originally, I was only supposed to have about a 2-hour layover on my way from Auckland, New Zealand to LA, but about a month before I left for my trip, I received an email from Qantas saying that my flight itinerary had been changed and I now had an 8-hour layover on my way from Auckland to Dallas. And I actually got a little bit excited and started to wonder, is 8 hours enough time to leave the airport and explore a little bit? And honestly, it might be enough time to quickly run to the Sydney Harbour, get those iconic shots, and wander through the botanical gardens before returning to the airport for your flight. And even a quick visit like that would beat 8 hours sitting in an airport. But then I got to thinking, on my original ill-fated 2020 trip that I've mentioned in previous videos, I was supposed to have a 30-hour layover in Honolulu, which I was personally really excited about because it would have given me the opportunity to visit Pearl Harbor and wander around Oahu a little bit before continuing on to Sydney, Australia. So now I started to wonder, what if I did something similar with my layover on the way home from Auckland? If I moved the Auckland to Sydney portion of my flight to Friday, and then my flight back to Dallas wouldn't be until 3 p.m. on Saturday, that would give me about 30 hours to explore Sydney, Australia. I reached out to Qantas and asked, hypothetically, would it be possible to split my flights up like that? And a few days later, Qantas wrote back and said, your new flight itinerary has been approved at no additional charge. So this is what I did with my 30 hours in Sydney, Australia. My flight got in at about 10 a.m. I cleared customs in about 45 minutes, and my hotel just happened to have a room ready for me when I arrived. So I grabbed some lunch at the hotel restaurant and then called an Uber to take me to the famous Taronga Zoo. Judge me if you want to, but I love zoos. And this zoo had koalas. Also, I knew that I wouldn't have enough time to see any of Australia's unique animals out in the wild during such a short trip. So going to the zoo gave me the opportunity to see all of these unique creatures. And I got a picture of the giraffes with the iconic Sydney skyline in the background, so... At the time of my visit, Taronga Zoo had recently opened their Nuradaya exhibit, showcasing the animals native to Australia. Nuradaya comes from Sydney First language, and it means this country. They already had some of these animals, but they were consolidating them to one specific area of the zoo. One of the first critters I got to see at Taronga Zoo was a tree-climbing kangaroo. These guys are native to Papua New Guinea and Northern Australia, and as their name implies, they climb trees. They have longer tails and they're able to move their hind legs independently of each other. Because of the way other kangaroos' hip bones and muscles are made, they can only move their hind legs together, which is why they end up hopping everywhere. Tree climbing kangaroos, on the other hand, have the ability to move their back feet independently, so they are able to take independent steps. Close to that was this enclosure. You follow this path from one side to the other. On either side of you are these smaller kangaroos and emus, and there's no barriers, so they're free range all in this area, and they'll come right up to you or cross the path in front of you. Other animals that were in the Nuradaya area of Taronga Zoo included a couple of dingoes, a sleepy Tasmanian devil, a platypus, a Cunningham skink, a couple of capybaras, an elusive cassowary, which is one of Australia's deadliest birds, which makes the fact that I didn't see it rather unsettling. And a couple of red-backed kangaroos, which are the big, scary, aggressive kangaroos that will attack you. So they were off in an enclosure by themselves where you could see them but not get too close. They can stay over there. At the time of my visit in August of 2023, Taronga's koalas hadn't yet been moved into their new enclosure in the Nuradaya area. Taronga Zoo had 6 resident koalas, but we only got to see 5 at the time. It turns out that the 6th koala had been loaned to another zoo as part of a koala repopulation program. They're most active first thing in the morning when they find eucalyptus leaves to eat, and then they spend most of their time sleeping.
They sleep for 18 to 20 hours. It's not because they're lazy, it's because of the food they eat. Eucalyptus doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it, doesn't have a lot of energy. Now they also have a really slow metabolism. So the eucalypt has toxins in it, So then that slows down the digestion process. So the food that these guys eat today, they're not going to produce that as waste for another 4 or 5 days. That's why they sleep so much.
These incredible little creatures have the ability to just curl up on the side of a tree branch and sleep for hours without actually needing to hang on to anything. Beyond Australia's native critters, Taronga Zoo is also home to a variety of animals from around the world. They have several camels, some adorable meerkats, a handful of lemurs from Madagascar, a small herd of giraffes, including a baby giraffe, and my personal favorite, a pride of African lions. You can still see Taronga's elephant temple, where they used to offer elephant rides. However, they have ceased offering these due to controversy about the unethical treatment of the elephants. Taronga Zoo is huge, but sadly I ran out of time to see everything because the zoo was closing. Traffic to cross the bridge back into Sydney Harbor is notoriously bad, especially during evening rush hour, so I opted to hop on a ferry across Sydney Harbor, thinking the waves wouldn't be too bad. I was wrong. I've mentioned in earlier videos how I don't like boats because I'm prone to seasickness.
I don't like boats.
And this ferry boat definitely tested my endurance. Before you even get on the ferry boat, the platform where you're waiting is basically a giant raft secured to the concrete pier, and the platform moves with the water. So if the water is super choppy, you're moving around a lot. And then once you're on the boat, you still have to sit and wait while everyone else gets on the boat, and the boat's rocking all over the place. I found a spot near the front of the boat like I did on my Doubtful Sound cruise back in my first video, and I just held on for dear life and prayed I wouldn't get sick. As miserable as I was feeling on this ferry ride, I will say this: the view of the Sydney Harbor from the ferry was absolutely stunning, and I caught it right at sunset. So in the end, the whole ordeal was kind of worth it. Once I was safely back on solid ground, I just started to wander around the Sydney Harbor, partially to kill time before my tour that evening, and partially to walk off some of the lingering seasickness. I was still feeling pretty woozy for a long time after the ferry ride, and I didn't really trust myself to eat anything, so I didn't get to stop and try any of the famous restaurants along the Sydney Harbor, which was kind of sad, but what can you do? Instead, I did something I've wanted to do since I was a kid. I wandered around the Sydney Opera House and took pictures of every single angle you could possibly imagine. Construction on the Sydney Opera House began in 1959, following the design of Danish architect Jorn Utzon, but political tensions in the 1960s caused Utzon to leave Australia, and the construction was completed by Australian architect Peter Hall. The Opera House officially opened in 1973 and has since become a center for the arts and community gatherings. The night I was there, Miss Saigon was playing at the Sydney Opera House, so it was a lot of fun to see all of these people show up in their Opera House attire heading in to see Miss Saigon. Parking at the Opera House was absolutely crazy. Several people opted to be dropped off at the entrance and not even deal with the parking, while other people opted to park farther away and then walk these long distances over cobblestone in these really scary heels. My feet were hurting for some of these women, like, how are your feet not dying? Your feet must be dying. Instead of seeing Miss Saigon, I headed over to the Sydney Harbor Bridge for an evening true crime walking tour. I'm a huge fan of true crime back home, so when I found out about this tour, I got really excited. It seemed like a really interesting and unique way to learn about some of the lesser-known history of Sydney. The tour is offered by Dark Stories Sydney, who also offers a tour about Sydney's gangster history. I walked clear to the other side of Sydney Harbor to this little park directly under Sydney Harbor Bridge. The meeting point for this tour wasn't very specific, so I ended up wandering around this arguably not very great part of town trying to find anything that resembled a tour group. I finally saw a group of people standing off by a street corner, and I decided it's worth risking asking these people where I might be able to find this tour group. So I'm approaching this group of people, hoping it's not a gang and I'm not about to be murdered and tossed into the Sydney Harbor, never to be seen or heard from again. Wouldn't it be ironic if I disappeared during a Sydney true crime tour? Luckily, the people I approached ended up being the tour group I was looking for, so everything turned out fine. Our guide was an enthusiastic young woman named Emily, and she shared a lot of interesting true crime stories with us while guiding us through Sydney's famous The Rocks neighborhood. Emily showed us the site of the first execution in Sydney's penal colony. The spot is now marked by a little round plaque on the corner of an intersection. Thomas Barrett has the distinction of being the first guy executed by hanging on this spot in 1788. When Barrett and several of his co-conspirators were court-martialed for stealing food, the people in charge of the penal colony realized they had a problem. They didn't actually have an executioner, and nobody really wanted the job. So they turned to John Ryan, one of Barrett's co-conspirators. They bribed him with a good meal and basically told him, "You're gonna be our executioner or else." So John Ryan became the first executioner of Sydney, and Thomas Barrett was hanged on February 27th, 1788. Emily also told us about the infamous ghost train fire at Luna Park. On June 9th, 1979, the ghost train ride tragically caught fire, resulting in the deaths of 7 people, 6 children and 1 adult. There are many theories about what caused the fire, but the mystery has never officially been solved. But that isn't even the creepiest part of the story. You see, earlier that day, the Godson family, John and Jennifer and their 2 sons, Damien and Craig, were out exploring the Sydney harbor when they were approached by a man in a loincloth wearing a mask with horns, and this guy asked John and Jennifer if they could take a picture of him with their boys. John and Jennifer, understandably so, were weirded out by this, but still agreed to take the picture. Yeah, no, I can't make this up. If you think I'm making it up, you can literally Google the photo. And it's a creepy picture. I don't think I can show the picture on this video because of copyrights, but if you Google Sydney ghost train fire, the picture will turn up. And the photo is honestly the creepiest thing we saw on this tour. Whether or not the encounter with the creepy horn dude was in any way related to the ghost train fire is up for debate. But the fact remains that Damien and Craig, along with their father John, were among the 7 victims of the ghost train fire later that day. There's a lot of theories flying around about the significance of Damien Godson's name and this seemingly demonic horned dude. If you Google it, there's all these weird theories flying around out there, all this speculation. There's really no evidence of anything. What we do know is that 6 young boys and one of their fathers sadly perished in this fire, in this mystery that has never been solved. Emily told us a lot of other really cool true crime stories and showed us a lot of other locations on this tour, but those are the ones I remember best. If you're planning to visit Sydney and have any interest in true crime, I do highly recommend taking this tour. Despite the dark subject matter, it was a lot of fun. Emily is not only very knowledgeable about these stories, but very charismatic and a very funny person, and she managed to inject some humor, dark though it may be, into the telling of some of these stories. It made the whole experience really enjoyable. Afterwards, I grabbed a taxi back to my hotel and got a late dinner before heading to bed, exhausted after a fun day of adventuring and excited for more adventures to come in the morning. Another thing I found out about while planning for my brief adventure in Sydney, Australia, was the koala breakfast experience at Wildlife Sydney Zoo. Wildlife Sydney Zoo is an interesting little place housed in a high-rise building along Sydney's Darling Harbour, and conveniently very close to my hotel. They mainly house animals that are native to Australia, and they used to offer an experience where they let you into the zoo before it officially opened and served a traditional continental breakfast near the koala exhibit. The experience had been discontinued due to COVID, so I had just kind of accepted that I wouldn't be able to do it on this trip. However, shortly before I left for my trip, I got an email from Wildlife Sydney Zoo announcing that they would be restarting their koala breakfast literally the week I was going to be there. I was just like, shut up and take my money. Koalas, koalas. So bright and early on Saturday morning, I headed down to the Wildlife Sydney Zoo for the koala breakfast experience. We were treated to some coffee and a private tour of the zoo. We got to see a lot of the same native Australian animals that I'd seen at Taronga Zoo the day before, but that early in the morning they were much more active and we were able to get a bit closer to them. Much like at Taronga Zoo, they have a room where these smaller kangaroos are able to roam freely and they'll come right up to you and let you pet them. And I got one to pose for a quick selfie. We also got to meet the resident wombat who was rescued as a baby and raised in the zoo. He's a very friendly critter, but he's considered dangerous due to his immense muscle mass. We also finally got to see a cassowary. which is one of Australia's deadliest birds, with a kill count of 2 really dumb tourists. We finally reached the koala enclosure on the top floor. The koalas were all active, happily munching on their eucalyptus, while we humans enjoyed a traditional eggs and bacon breakfast. As part of the experience, we got to enter the koala enclosure and pose next to the koalas. We couldn't touch the koalas, but we could stand next to them. This is actually where I found the 6th Taronga Zoo koala, who was on loan to Wildlife Sydney Zoo as part of a koala repopulation program. This koala was a proud and sleepy new dad, and we got to see its baby with its mom in one of the other enclosures. Sadly, my time in Sydney was quickly coming to an end, so I spent my last couple hours wandering around the Sydney Harbor again and exploring the gorgeous botanical gardens. And that's how I spent 30 hours in Sydney, Australia. I definitely could have spent longer there. There were so many other things I didn't get to do, and I will definitely have to return and explore more of Australia someday. For now, I'm incredibly grateful to have had the opportunity to visit Sydney at all. If you haven't yet had a chance to see the videos about the rest of my New Zealand trip, I'm adding the links to those down in the description. And please consider subscribing to my channel for more trip report videos to come. Okay, bye for now.